Hello, and welcome to our next episode of BSME Talks, the podcast that brings you real conversations about the things that matter in international education, both in the Middle East and beyond. In today's episode, we will be exploring staff retention and recruitment in uncertain times. I'm Debra Forsyth, CEO of British Schools in the Middle East, and I'm delighted to be joined today by Rachel Higgins, Principal and CEO of Jumeirah Primary School in Dubai, and Sean Sibley, Principal of Doha English Speaking School in Qatar. Welcome, Rachel. Welcome, Sean, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for having us.
Just to set a little bit of context for today's conversation, we are all aware that teacher recruitment is a global challenge. The 2024 UNESCO Global Report on Teachers estimated that 44 million additional teachers will be needed globally by 2030 if we are to achieve the UN Sustainable Development Goal of universal primary and secondary education. The report also noted that while sub-Saharan Africa faces massive recruitment gaps, high-income countries are also grappling with teacher retention. 53% of primary classes in some areas are covered by temporary or unqualified staff, and 59% of teachers in England are expected to leave the profession within the next 3 years. The impact of attrition is significant. Approximately 58% of the total demand for new teachers by 2030 is driven by the need to replace those leaving the profession rather than creation of new positions. So we all know that we're starting from a challenging global backdrop for our conversation today. So to kick off, Rachel and Sean, I'd like to take you back to December, January, the start of this year and of your school's renewal and recruitment season. And I'd like to get a feel for what was the general retention picture at each of your schools back in December and January? Roughly what percentage of your staff had indicated their intention to leave, and how did this compare with previous years?
Actually, from our perspective, we are a primary sector only. My particular school that I lead is primary sector only. So actually, this year we were quite in line with previous years. And I know that it's not going to hit the primary sector in the same way as it's going to hit the secondary sector in terms of mobility and in terms of the need for so many more employees. So we were at our standard 8-9%. We'd had all of the one-to-one conversations, and we were in a position where we felt pretty much like other years is that we had the natural attrition of those going back to the UK or onto further overseas postings. There would obviously be a couple that would come over the term too, in terms of those going for promotions with other schools within Dubai perhaps, or within the UAE. But we were personally in a very similar position than we'd been the previous, say, 3 to 4 years, of having about 8-9% going onto their next chapter or onto back to home, if that makes sense. So it hadn't really affected us in any shape or form. So it was a bit of a typical year for us, but I do appreciate that I'm a primary sector.
Thanks, Rachel. That's an 8 to 9% is actually quite a nice number.
Yeah.
You don't want that figure to be too low. Schools can become stagnant with no turnover. And Sean, what were things looking like for you back in December, January?
Well, I think it was a bit different in Qatar because obviously we'd had 2 attacks in the June and in the September on the headquarters here and on the American airbase. So I think there was a level of anxiety. So we had more people saying they were going to be leaving than usual. Normally, we're only working on about 5% who leave desks at any time each year. But this time, it was 11% of our whole staff who said they wouldn't be here for this next academic year. Now, that was initially the one in December. That's actually increased since then. But in December, that was the case. To be honest, I was expecting more. I was expecting a higher percentage. A lot of our teachers have young children. And like I said, there was people were frightened and feeling a bit uneasy at that time. Obviously, we did lots as a school to help with that. But yeah, that was the initial picture.
Okay, so interesting then to see already, Sean, you were seeing some impact of those much smaller scale short-term conflicts that had happened within Qatar last year. And then, of course, the bigger conflict of the Middle East since the 28th of February. has created a genuinely turbulent time for schools across the region. You were both in countries that were facing incoming missiles. Schools in your countries were closed and moved to online learning for periods of time. Your governments were issuing shelter-in-place alerts periodically. So definitely we will have seen, I'm sure, some impact of that time. I am interested to hear how your school community responded to the concerns that the conflict raised. Did you see an impact on staff expressing an intention to leave? Did you have anybody that walked out the door immediately and said, that's it, I'm off? Or did you have an increase in staff saying, right, that's it, I'm leaving at the end of the school year? Sean, what impact did this new conflict have for your school in Qatar?
Obviously, it was incredibly challenging, not just operationally, but emotionally for staff and families as well. I think moving quickly to online learning, managing alerts, maintaining calm, it required a real huge collective effort. In terms of retention, we did see a small number of staff reconsider their plans in light of the bombings. Some chose to leave earlier. We had some immediate resignations with immediate effect. Because actually Qatar and the ministries requested that all people had to return to school, and that included staff. And it was just after our Eid break, actually. But so some decided to leave with immediate effect. I mean, it went up to, I think we had 16% in the end altogether who left. So yeah, it was a challenge. But what was really encouraging was how many staff chose to stay despite the uncertainty. And that for me kind of reflected the strength of the community we have here at DES.
Thanks, Sean. And what about you, Rachel?
Because I think, like you, Sean, we've got strong retention. So a lot of our staff actually had done the COVID already. So they'd done the online learning. So actually, this time round, we switched on very quickly. They sort of got together in their teams very, very quickly as well in terms of managing how they delivered the online learning. So we had a week of the online learning, and then while holiday was brought forward. So within that week, I think I had two teachers say that actually that was probably going to be them done, but at the end of the year, as you said, Deborah. But I think they were going to be next year leavers anyway, but I think this just brought it forward. And they've got family back at home who they're responsible for. They're the only two still out here. And I think it really made them unnerved in the fact that they wanted to then be back at home with family. This was quite different, and we'd learned a lot from COVID. So we have got people in apartments delivering online learning, but they were on their own, but they could still move. So in COVID, obviously, we couldn't go anywhere. So they were isolated. Whereas this time they were teaching on their own, but they were able to see other people in the evening. So we very much made a decision to put one member of SLT in with each of the teams. So that person was like leading a little mini school, if you like. So there's a head of year, obviously, but we had an SLT member who was a link there, who was checking in with them all daily. So that became, almost like the mother hen sort of figure, if you like, for that particular team. And I think it made them feel very, very connected. So we didn't have leavers immediately. I didn't have anybody, but ours was very different from Sean's because we were then ours extended onto continued online learning. And it was very quickly the case that from here that you could deliver that online learning from wherever you want. So I think it was a very different scenario than they had obviously where you are, Sean. And I think had it been different, we might have had the same outcome that Sean had. But we had two literally leave straight away in terms of expressing that they were going to leave at the end of the year, but not actually at that point in time.
Yeah, and I think just in regards to that as well, sorry, Deborah, I think, the week before our 2-week Eid break, we went online. So we allowed a degree of flexibility there as well. So some of our staff decided to return to the UK a week before the break because, as Rachel said, they could offer online learning anywhere in the world as long as they kind of follow the Qatar hours. I think that's an important point to make in the fact that as a school, you do have to offer that kind of degree of flexibility and support and understanding, because that means actually long term you do retain staff because they'll remember that. They'll remember those key times when you've supported them.
That's great, Sean, and that takes me very nicely onto my next question, really. And this is looking at how you as a school manage the uncertainty. In times like this, staff are very closely watching you as individuals to see how you're handling things, and what your leadership approach is can really determine the whole school mood. So we've just heard there, Sean, about that flexibility of doing online learning from anywhere where you happen to be was one strategy that was positive and helped teachers feel a little bit more comfortable. Were there any other strategies that you found work particularly well in terms of keeping your community together and supporting staff retention? Was there anything with hindsight that you thought you might do differently?
For us, it was about being honest as well and transparent with staff and setting our expectations very clearly as well. You know, giving deadlines, giving dates. Yes, there was some flexibility, but you have to have expectations for your staff, and ultimately putting children first. Children needed a teacher in front of them, and I think the leadership style. The SLT had to remain calm and consistent, even when we didn't have all the answers. Staff needed to feel there was a plan and that their leaders were present and visible. Like Rachel said, having SLT members being the mother hen, I think it's a real good analogy, that, and keeping things as normal as possible for the children. If I'm honest, one thing I reflect on is the pace. In those moments, everything moves so quickly. And perhaps with hindsight, there are times when potentially slowing communication slightly just to ensure clarity might have been a bit more beneficial. We were moving at such a fast pace that sometimes too quickly. Maybe I just needed to take a breath as a leader and just consider things a bit more wildly as well.
Thanks, Sean. Rachel?
So very much resonates with me in terms of the word calm, and that's really quite challenging to be a leader in these times, in terms of being that person who has to have a completely calm expression at all times. The one thing we did, what we moved from school to online, was I did a daily briefing, and that seemed to go down very well in terms of a 2:45 connection meeting every day. So everybody would finish their online learning, and for every single day that we were online throughout the entire of this experience, we had a 2:45 catch-up meeting where, and quite frankly, there was usually enough messages to keep going each day, but also just to thank them, to reassure them, to feed back to them what, I receive emails. I've got the pleasure of receiving emails from parents sometimes that they don't necessarily see. So a chance to be able to reiterate those lovely positive messages that I was receiving, and also to give them that sense of calm. You've only, it's almost like you've got 24 hours until I see you again. I'll see you tomorrow. I'll see you tomorrow. I'll see you tomorrow. So that aspect seemed to work very well. And the trust factor as well, that we as leaders were saying, I completely and utterly believe in you. I know you can do this. You do, you need to do what you need to be safe and feel secure, and able to deliver the very best version of yourself. So if it means delivering it here, do that. If it means, if we had the flexibility to do so, if it means delivering it from Bali, Singapore, or the UK, you do that. So I know that you need to be, in the same way as I need to be, present and have a sense of calm when I'm delivering online. So therefore, as a teacher, you need to make that decision for you, your family, your circumstances. If you need to go back to the UK so that your grandparents can look after the children while you're delivering online, you do that. So that seemed to go a long way in terms of that high level of belief, trust, and, as Sean said, a really good sense of calmness, even when it doesn't feel like that.
Another thing I did, Deborah, which was a minor thing maybe, but I think it was quite nice, was I read a story every night to the children via video. So it was a Roald Dahl story. And I think, and like Rachel, we had those regular check-ins with staff as well. And I think that was really important. So with staff, it's important, but also with children. Our children just aged 3 to 13. So they needed to see staff, teachers, me, whatever, because that's what they see on a normal day-to-day basis. So it's just being visible. And I shared a video with parents as well, where I said, look, any questions you've got, email them through, and next time I do a video, I'll cover those questions. So just making sure that everything was okay and keeping that communication going all the time.
Yeah, so hearing strong messages there of communication and connection, very regular connection, so no one's feeling isolated, being really important there. And then what about you, as leaders, can often be forgotten, but you need support too. Rachel, you mentioned how challenging it was to exude that aura of calm when you maybe weren't necessarily feeling that yourself. What support was available to you as leaders during these challenging times?
Well, for me, obviously the obvious, and I'm not being trite, it is the BSME. It's having those connections. WhatsApp is obviously the most immediate way of doing that, but that shared collaboration, that shared camaraderie, actually having a bit of a giggle sometimes, even when things are going badly, you've got to be able to find some sort of joy in everything, haven't you? So the connections that you make with people like-minded principals, whether those be in an official group such as the BSME or those smaller groups. I've got a book behind me now which Fiona Cotton recommended to me. So it's things like that where, again, like you, Sean, she recommended, she was doing reading online. So it's those recommendations that you get in these WhatsApp groups and you go, well, actually, I think I'll give that a go. That's obviously served another community brilliantly. I'm going to do the same thing myself. So that collaboration has just been phenomenal. And as I say, that camaraderie, that you're not doing this on your own. You are surrounded by a group of people who are doing the same thing. And they are literally just there, to reach out to whenever you need to.
Yeah, for me, I mean, my wife's a head teacher actually, so I think we supported each other, and we haven't got, our children are grown up now, so it was just us two. But I think, yeah, like Rachel, really important to be able to speak to the other BSME heads in our WhatsApp group. And the good thing is we trust each other, and we can be very frank with each other in that WhatsApp group as well. That made a huge difference. Sharing approaches. I think also having a real strong senior leadership team was critical at this time. I think you really learn a lot, don't you, about yourselves and about your leaders. Because I think leadership can feel quite isolating in those moments, but when you've got a team that you trust, it becomes potentially more manageable as well. So just trusting each other, and you know what, in some kind of strange way, it's really strengthened us as a team. It's brought us all together. I think when you're facing kind of a situation like that, it brings everybody closer together, and actually long term makes you a stronger team.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah, that's a really interesting silver lining there, Sean. So thank you very much for picking up on that. I want us now to think a little bit about well-being. There is still a real risk, I think, that the uncertainty, and we do still have some uncertainty, that this can quietly erode staff well-being, even amongst people not planning to leave. That sense of background anxiety can affect morale, focus, and ultimately performance. What have you been doing in your schools to actively monitor and respond to that well-being need of your staff?
Well, what's worked well for us is actually simply being human, so showing empathy, listening, acknowledging that it's okay not to feel completely settled. I think there's probably an underlying sense of anxiety amongst the staff. So we've looked at kind of workload as well, being very mindful of not giving additional tasks to staff at the moment, because generally by the end of the day, they want to go home. They want to be with their children, they want to be with their family. So just acknowledging that. I would say increasing informal check-ins, ensuring that leaders are visible and approachable, giving staff permission to talk, but also not forcing it as well, because there are some staff who on the surface, seem absolutely fine, but not everybody expresses their concerns openly, but it doesn't mean it's not there as well. But we've done a variety of other things as well. I mean, we had an ice cream van that came in for staff. And actually we gave them each a voucher. We've also got a shawarma van coming in tomorrow. We've done kind of treats every day, really. And I think those are important, just to make sure staff realise that you are there for them, and you're really praising them, for carrying on doing what they do, and they're doing an amazing job.
I totally agree. And daily check-ins, as Sean was saying there. So we've had our wellbeing teams every day when we were online. They had a 40-minute session in the morning in between the online learning sessions, where people could just pop into a room, if you like, a virtual room, and just chat through things, any concerns they had, whether regarding professional or personal. And that's continued since we've come back to school. So those wellbeing teams are there, available at break times for staff members to pop in and speak to them as well. We've moved the briefing, what we had at the end of every day, that's become a high five every morning. So for 5 minutes every morning, there's a moment where we just share normality of what's going to happen for the rest of the day. Some days there's been an announcement which we've then relayed the messaging obviously to staff, but it just means that we've again had that daily check-in where today's another normal day. Here we go. We're going to be amazing. You're going to be amazing. You're going to be fine. Off you go and have a fabulous day, and just set the scene for a really positive day. But I think what we've also established is that people need to look in and look after each other. So the same way as that within those teams is, please do indicate to anybody, particularly that SLT link that you've now got, let them know if you think anybody's starting to waver at all, or if there's any indication that staff member is exhibiting, particularly in the first week when we came back, any signs of anxiety. So we shared posters about what children might show themselves in terms of being anxious, and made clear that that might not show itself in the first 3 or 4 days of excitement of being back, but you might notice other signs 10 days later of fatigue, etc. Once that adrenaline starts to come out of staff members and out of children, that's when you can start to see signs of different signs of anxiety in terms of fatigue, exhaustion, and general sort of malaise, if that makes sense.
I'd like now to move from retention of your existing staff and have a little bit of a look towards recruitment for next academic year. And for both of you, I'm assuming that your recruitment cycle had started before the conflict, and you possibly had already started interviewing, maybe even appointing people. What did the start of that recruitment cycle look like for you at the beginning of the year in terms of volume of applications that you were seeing, the quality of the field, and just general interest from candidates in the UK and internationally?
I mean, for us, I mean, I think the recruitment market was already competitive. With us, there's a number of new schools that are opening in Qatar, so that brings an added level of competition. But as I mentioned, we'd had 2 bombings previous to these ones, back in June and September. So I think we were seeing perhaps fewer applications historically, but there was still a real strong calibre overall. I think what we've had to be much sharper on with our recruitment is a real clarity of messaging and perhaps a speed of communication, and perhaps selling the whole experience of the school, not just the role as well. And actually really pushing the fact that we are a community school. So actually we look after our staff, we're kind to our staff. And actually throughout all of this, it's brought people closer together. So we tried to turn it on its head really and try to sell that part of the school a bit more.
And what were things like for you, Rachel, in terms of responses to your advertisements?
Last, we tend to do our recruitment sort of November time in terms of going over to the UK. So that had carried on as normal. So actually, yes, before all this started in February, we were in that, that sort of position of feeling like we might have 1 or 2 following promotions to other schools in Dubai, but that's probably where we were up to. That's very normal for us to get to, the end of term 2 with 1 or 2 potentials, but majority fixed and ready to go and setting up buddies, etc., etc. So that's where we were then. And obviously, as you can imagine, things have changed, and we're in the position that we've not been before, where we're still recruiting for staff now. And that's, that's in the time that I've been here, that's not been something we've had to do. So it's that puts us into an interesting new chapter of recruiting in May, which we haven't done.
Yeah. So that $1 million question then, I guess, is what impact has the regional conflict had on your recruitment pipeline? Have you had candidates who you had already appointed, who had accepted job for next year, who've withdrawn, or that are asking difficult questions? And if so, what steps are you taking, or what have you found helpful to reassure these incoming appointees and to help them address their legitimate concerns?
Yeah, well, we've lost 3 in the last week, as it was coming to. I'll tell you what's happened is we have an online meeting which we've actually just had today, so I can feedback on that as well. So as we were coming towards this and setting up buddies, so what we did do was put buddies into place maybe a month earlier than we normally do, to try and gauge exactly this. Do those incoming members of staff need that extra level of reassurance earlier on? No fake, as you say, no over reassurance, and nothing, not over promising and under delivering, but just some sort of general reassurance. And last week we had 2 people withdraw applications as we came up to the sort of here's the team's invite for next Monday. And then 1 we haven't heard from at all, so we've actually rescinded that appointment over the weekend. So the 3 has been in the last week.
Okay, so you're buddying up there, Rachel, your incoming staff with your existing staff, yeah?
Yes.
And getting them having those conversations already.
Which we always do, but we've brought that forward. So we would normally start off with an online Teams meeting, which we've just done today, and then that set the buddies up. But we've done it the other way around this year, because I felt that obviously those one-to-one WhatsApps, emails, communications might be essential earlier. I felt like the longer we left these incoming teachers on their own, they might have those concerns, or as you say, reading or watching press in different countries, they might get a distorted view of what it was like to actually come out here. But luckily today they did, all the ones we were expecting turned up, which was fantastic. So that's a good first start. And we did something that we haven't done before, and I'm kicking myself that we've never done it before, is rather than just going through everybody in one Zoom meeting together and Teams meeting together and going through kind of a mini induction process, we started off with that for 10 minutes. And then we actually put them into breakout rooms today on a Teams call so that they could then have that buddying time, put a name to a face, and actually, spend 15, 20 minutes with their buddy, asking the questions that they probably didn't feel safe or willing to do so in front of everybody. And hopefully that starts a communication now that they'll continue on, now that they've actually got a bit more of a bond with somebody who's here, who can actually say, it's actually okay, it's fine.
Oh, that's very positive. And what about in Qatar, Sean?
Yeah, we had like Rachel, we had a small number of withdrawals. We interviewed, offered, we were chasing references, and eventually they said, no, sorry, we're withdrawing. It was frustrating for us, but understandable. We've had candidates ask perhaps directly about safety and stability and contingency planning, and rightly so. But we've been very clear with our newbies. We're still recruiting like Rachel at the moment, and it's the latest I've ever recruited. I think we've got 2 more to go at the moment, which is very unusual. But generally, we're not too bad with recruitment. People generally want to work here, which is lovely. But we've been very honest. We don't hide, like you said, we don't reassure, over reassure people. So we explain what's happened, but we also explain how we've responded and what systems are in place. I don't think candidates expect perfection. They just expect professionalism and transparency. So, I think we've tried to work on that more than anything else. We have buddies, but I'm going to pinch that idea, Rachel, of setting up these buddies earlier. I like that because I think they probably need it a bit earlier than normal, don't they, at the moment? So I think that's a great idea. Allowing
the incoming teachers to feel that they're already part of your community has got to be a good step forward.
Also encouraging them. Today, we've really strongly encouraged them all to join our Instagram and our Facebook accounts, so that they can actually see that daily diet. Now, if they start to follow us as a school, they'll start to feel, number one, part of the community, but also they'll start to see a normal representation of what's happening here every day. I think that's probably going to be something to be encouraged as well.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. That sense of normality that they're possibly not seeing evidence of on, as you say, on sort of world media talking about the area. So my final question then for you both on this topic. I'd like to think about what you would like to share with maybe both your current and your incoming staff that genuinely gives you confidence about the year ahead when you're looking forward to September 26 and thinking of your school community. What is it that makes you really sure that you're in the right place, doing the right thing, and that these people should really be part of your community and continuing with you?
For me, I think we're probably better prepared than we've ever been, and more connected as a team than we've ever been. And perhaps also clearer in how we operate in uncertain situations. I think we're more resilient. We've had COVID. We've now had 2 bomb alerts last year, some this year as well. So as a team, we're really strong. That's really brought us closer together. And the way our staff have responded during the challenging, the professionalism and the care for the willingness to go above and beyond, that gives me real confidence and that we're in the right place. I think logistically as well, what we're doing is planning to create a pool of teachers just in case, you know what I mean? And it's almost kind of a safety precaution, really, that people can step in if need be. So, for example, we've done little things like rewarding our current supply staff with a little bonus, just saying thank you very much for stepping in at the last minute, to help our school, making sure we keep them on side, because who knows, we may need them, in the new academic year as well.
I think for us, it's the reassurances that actually it has returned to what I would describe as, our new normal very quickly. So there's 2 aspects to it, but as Sean said, is that we know what to do. We have what's worked very, very well. Should we ever, hopefully touch wood not, but should we ever need to do the same thing again, that we have, we've got a tried and tested plan. We know exactly what to do. The speed in which our families have come back, I think, is a really good indication of the trust. Yeah. I mean, parents are handing over their most precious thing in the whole wide world, and they happily did so based on the plans that we sent out, based on, our return to school plans. And very rapidly. You know, we're down to a minuscule amount of children now who are still online. Most of those are outside the country, with a couple here, still thinking about coming back. But our retention rates of children, our re-enrollment rates, I think, give a really good indication that parents are here, parents are staying. And they really are a good litmus test of that it's safe, and you put your trust into it.
No, that's great to hear all of those things, actually. I think, Sean, there you're picking up on the camaraderie and the strengthening of teams and communities, I think is a real positive to take away there. Yeah, and as you say, Rachel, that idea that life has got back to normal, people are back in the country and going about their everyday business, is shown there by the fact that pretty much all of your students are back. So that's also another positive for people to take away. So thank you both very much for your input on the conversation. I think it will be one that will resonate deeply with both school leaders and teachers across the BSME community and beyond, particularly with people in the UK that are looking to coming out in September, August. So I think as we collectively face unusual challenges, it does help to know that we're not alone and we're not navigating these alone. And I think your input has been really positive for that. Before you go and we close the podcast, I'm going to ask you both our closing question. This is one we ask every guest on BSME Talks. We know that teachers can be hugely influential. They can have far-reaching ripple effects that we can't often even imagine. So I would like to ask each of you now to tell me a teacher that you have had in your schooling life that has had a really strong influence on you, and why is that? Sean, would you like to go first?
Yeah, there's probably a few I could mention, but the one that stands out, and it was a man called Mr. Risotto, who was my maths teacher when I was at primary school. Because what he did was he matched kind of really high expectations, but matched that with real genuine care. And he was very good at kind of creating relationship. Made it clear that effort mattered and that standards mattered, but also they believed in me. That meant such a lot. And I think it's probably something I've tried to carry on into my own leadership as well, that balance of kind of high expectations, but also strong relationships.
Thanks, Sean. And Rachel, what about you?
Well, I mean, it's an interesting one. I always dread it when someone's going to ask me this, because I don't have that light bulb moment of this inspirational teacher. But I have a collection of memories of things, and I suppose I always try and change things up. I have a collection of memories of things that I didn't particularly love about a lot of teachers, in terms of the way some of them were just there was too much of a predetermination of what you were going to be like. There was a lot of ceilings I'm going back a while here. There was a lot of expectations for everyone to be the same and to do the same and to do it in the same order. So I suppose I always look for the teachers, when asked this question, that actually, like you say, Sean, really spent the time building a relationship. And that's everything now that our foundation of our school is built on, is building relationships. I suppose it would be Miss Bridges, who gave up her lunch hours, so that we could play the piano in her classroom, because she knew we particularly loved doing that. It's those people who go the extra mile to find out who you are as a person, and then to allow that platform for you to have a successful moment or a collection of moments in time. Because that relationship always comes before you even believing that you'll be able to do anything beyond what you thought was what you were capable of doing. So she would be one. But I think it's an interesting one where I think throughout my whole professional career, it's been about looking for not the negatives, but looking for things that are, I wish, maybe if we could just change that or reframe that or do that a slightly different way, then more children have an opportunity to be successful if we were able to identify the relationship that underpins everything.
Thank you both very much for sharing your reflections. They're really interesting ones to hear. Rachel, Sean, thank you very much for joining us today. I will say, from a personal point of view, it's a privilege to work alongside leaders of your calibre in the BSME community. You both do a lot for the organisation, so thank you for that. And thank you all very much for listening. I hope you enjoyed this episode of BSME Talks. If today's conversation has prompted any thoughts or questions you'd like to share, please do get in touch with us at BSME. And until next time, happy teaching.